Hey guys, my name is Loveless and we are back with Quirk Knife. I haven't done this in fucking forever, but we're back to our regular scheduled programming. Even though that I'm kind of doing more on my channel, it's like gonna take forever, but I'll get back to whatever like this. Okay, let's get straight into it. We are at chapter 29. Look, May. If he told you he's sick, he's sick, Izuku shouted into his phone as Toga and Dabi trailed after him happily, the blonde humming some American pop song that would be stuck in his head later without a doubt. May was silent on the other end and huffed, mumbling a goodbye and hanging up before Izuku had the chance to answer. What's Pop Bubblegum's bubble? Dabi asked curiously as the smaller boy pocketed his phone. I don't know. Hitoshi left at lunch today because apparently got a cold, but May keeps telling me she thinks he's lying, he explained, beginning his ascent up the fire escape. Dabi hummed as he shimmied up underneath him. Well, maybe he is lying. Well, maybe he was lying. Maybe, Izuku responded. But if he lied, then he obviously wasn't comfortable with sharing the truth, which is fine. If he was lying, he'll let us know when he's ready. Izuku reached the window, greeted by Mika, and climbed through and toed off his pink and white light-up shoes, resting them carefully on the window sill as his friends did the same. I don't know, Toga finally contributed. He's not really one to lie, which makes me a little worried if I'm being honest. Izuku waved her off and headed to the couch. It's fine, He cut himself off with a scream as he landed right on top of someone as he leaped over the couch. Ah, fuck. The person groaned as they were winded, throwing Izuku to the ground as they sat up. Izuku blinked blearily and rubbed his eyes, looking up from where he was seated on his bottom, only to be met by familiar dead eyes. Toshi? The little squad minus one all stared at each other for a moment in silence as Hisashi and Shota ran out of the kitchen to see what all the commotion was about. Izuku panicked inside. Who the hell are you? Yes, completely convincing. Hitoshi responded stupidly. Well, this is pointless. Shota interrupted. Izuku, how stupid do you think I am? Do you really want me to answer that? No. Toga grabbed some knives from her pocket. Are you going to turn us in now? Because you have proof to do it? Why you keep dragging this out? It's tiring. Shota ignored the weapons and walked forward, pushing a bowl of soup against her chest until she accepted it. As Izuku said, I have no proof, do I? For all I know, Chaos, Morphine, and Blaze are 3 old men that evaded the police. You 3 are just kids visiting for dinner, right? Izuku thinned his eyes as he accepted the bowl of soup, Hisashi giving him a bright smile and flopping down on the floor, his usual spot. Izuku? Hitoshi croaked as, for the first time, he noticed how destroyed his friend looked and sounded. Kayabu died earlier. Izuku didn't cry. His lips didn't wobble. His heart didn't sink. Because loss is something consistent he knows all his life. It was too familiar to be upset about. But as tears dropped into Hitoshi's bowl and his shoulders shook, Izuku felt his cheeks grow damp and his nose growing pink. Oh, is all he could respond with, curling against the arm of the couch and stirring his soup. Why? She's been sick for some time, Hitoshi admitted. I just didn't say anything because I guess they thought maybe it would be fine. I don't know, but now it's not fine. Is that why you left school earlier? Not because of a cold? Is that what May told you? Izuku nodded. Yeah, it's why I left. I gotta say goodbye, and Aizawa drove me there. He's a really bad driver. Hisashi perked up. Yes, he is. Actually, his driving is the reason I broke my first bone outside of hero training. Oh my god, did he crash the car? Toga cried in panic. How badly were you guys hurt? I didn't crash the car, Shota snapped with pink cheeks. And Zashi, you better not share. No, he didn't crash the car. He hit me. Hitoshi whipped his head over. What? It was when he first got his license, and he was coming to pick me up for a study session at the library. But he drove onto my lawn and cracked 2 of my ribs and broke my leg. Damn, Dabi snickered as Shota shook his head back and forth, trying to hide his blush with his bangs. So, Hitoshi laughed wetly and wiped some of the tears from his eyes. Was this before or after you got together? Get this, Hisashi yells, Shota having to use his own quirk to quiet him down. So he calls the ambulance and came with me since my dad wasn't home, then asked me out at the hospital. Social cues, dude. Dabi howled, clutching his stomach as it twisted. Your friend was dying and you decided it was a fantastic moment to ask for some dick? No, I didn't. He wasn't dying, okay? And I didn't ask for it. I was knocked out for 12 hours. Hitoshi laughed a little harder as his eyes dried out completely. How'd you even get your license in the first place? Pretty sure you have to know how to drive for that. I don't know, Shota responded after a moment in breathless tone, a chuckle of his own escaping his lips before he could smother it down. Azuku's eyes lit up. Shota Aizawa, was that a laugh I just heard? Don't use my full name, you little shit. Hisashi wiped a tear from his eyes as he continued laughing. Oh, Zuku, you have to know he gets the giggles when he's drunk, and it's the cutest thing ever. One of my students can hear you, Hisashi. Stop. And he tries to flirt, but he's not very good with words. So it ends up being, Hisashi, shut up, I swear. These stupid little pickup lines you find in like a children's book or a very crude comment. There's no in between. For example, he once said to me that he wanted to take me home and stop, Shota cried, dangerously close to a line, as he tossed himself over the table and tackled his husband to the ground, slapping a hand over his mouth. They wrestled for about 2 seconds before Shota drew his hand back to his chest with a yelp. He just fucking bit me. Azuka's a biter too, Toga laughed. He bites literally anyone. I swear he does it to see if they taste different from the last. I do not, Azuka cried back. Biting is a practical and easy self-defense, or can even be used in an offensive move. Allow me to demonstrate. He dove for Shota and bit his knee. The grown man screeched like a kid watching some sort of cartoonish Halloween movie. See? Offensive. Get back here. Shota snatched Zuku and pulled him back against his chest, tickling the boy's ribs until he began shouting that he was going to throw up. Hisashi then finally forced him to release his victim. Thank God for Izuku, because he really thought he was going to vomit. He sighed as he resettled on the couch and looked over to Hitoshi. So, where are you going now? There's more space with us, of course. Hitoshi crossed his legs on the couch and anxiously looked over to the pro heroes. Well, I'm staying here tonight, but tomorrow you'll also be staying here, Shota interrupted as Hisashi nodded. I will? Yes, the blonde clarified. And the day after tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, and I think he gets it. Zashi, look, I'm not letting one of my students live somewhere that isn't safe. Even when we're not in school, you're still my responsibility. Hitoshi stayed silent, and Izuku knew why. He was unsure how to trust adults. They had always ignored him when he was in need. He didn't know how to build the trust he wanted to. Don't you need to, sign stuff? He mumbled while pulling a thread on his couch. Hitoshi watched the white kitten pad over and jump onto his lap, leaning up so she can press her paw against her chin. I think even the cat's telling you to shut up, Toga snickered, and Izuku bet back a smile. Davi snorted quietly. Hitoshi shot them a quick glare and turned his attention back to Shota and Aizawa. It's true. I now belong to the foster system, and it's not legal for me to even be here anymore. I don't care, Shota said bluntly. Besides, Nezu will take care of it. Trust me. There's nothing you need to worry about, and we'll get your stuff tomorrow morning since it's a Sunday. Toga, Izuku, and Dabi all looked at another with confused glances. What does Sunday mean? Oh, there's no school on Sundays, Hisashi explained. Like the weekend, but it's only one day. As the conversation died down and attention was turned back to Toga's show, in which she almost had done by now until Shota spoke again. By the way, he drawled, I imagine your little pink explosive friend wouldn't want to be left out. She can come along, and if she gets too loud, we'll just stick her in a room with Zashi. I'm sure those two can keep a conversation going for hours. And Izuku kept that in his mind as the three of them crawled out of the window later that evening, dismissing the hero's offer of a bed like they did every day. Hitoshi stepped out of Aizawa's car, feeling both physically and emotionally drained. Walking closer to the closed library with his own keys felt off-putting. His hands shaking as he kept trying to unlock the door. His breathing accelerated, and the keys wouldn't fit in its pandered slot. And all he wanted to do was collapse on the ground and let it swallow him whole and, let me do it. Yamada gently took the keys from Hitoshi's trembling hands, unlocking the door and pushing it open, allowing Hitoshi to enter. The familiar smell of fresh paper filled his senses, and he automatically felt calmer. A loud meow catching his attention as he grew closer. A large black cat rounded the corner, long fur making it seem even fatter. Stop being so dramatic, Bean. You're not wasting away, you Chuck. Hitoshi mumbled and squatted down, grunting as he picked up the old cat, leaning over his shoulder like a baby and scratching his back. Aizawa's eyes were wide as he stared at Bean. Hitoshi could have sworn the man's eyes were tearing up. Zashi? Yes. The blonde chuckled right away. We can take it home. Bean meowed loudly right into Hitoshi's ear. I get it. You're hungry. It's been like 12 hours, dude. You're not starving. He lowered the cat back down to the ground as his back audibly cracked, and he walked back behind the checkout counter, grabbing a pale pink bowl and putting a scoop of food in it. Walking back around, Hitoshi crouched in front of Bean and held up a finger. What do we say before we eat? Bean sat there for a moment as his tail swayed back and forward, then let out a quiet meow. You're welcome, Hitoshi muttered, putting the bowl down as the cat pounced on it and began to devour the pebbles. Hisashi watched with a smile. The cat talks? No. What? Hitoshi disappeared into the stairwell. I'll be right back, and began steadily climbing into his living space along with Kayabu's, and as well as the kitchen, the laundry room, and the bathroom. He kept his eyes down, fishing out all the bags he could find from his closet, filling it up with all the clothing and toiletries he can get his hands on. It wasn't much, but Kayabu worked hard to get him what he needed, so he wouldn't let them go to waste. It wasn't long until Hitoshi had his bags packed, looking once more at the bland room with mixed feelings. He spoke into the quiet room. Thank you. I mean, superpowers exist now, so ghosts and spirits aren't out of the realm of possibility, right? He chuckled weakly, and tears threatened to spill as he stared at his shoes. Guess I'll go become a hero or something. Yeah. Cheer for me, I guess. With that, Hitoshi turned around and walked back downstairs with a false confidence, grabbing one last plastic bag to fill up with cat products. "Bean!" he called as the cat trotted over, allowing himself to be easily picked up and tossed over Hitoshi's shoulder. He cradled the black cat and turned towards the two men who were quietly looking through shelves upon shelves of books. He stayed quiet and ran his fingers through Bean's long fur, staring at nothing in particular until Aizawa sighed loudly. "I suppose we should go. I have patrol tonight and I want to take a nap." Yamada snorted. "Even if you didn't have patrol, you would still want to go home and take a nap." Hitoshi looked at the rows of books and held Bean tighter. He didn't know if he would return anytime soon. Aizawa and Yamada's apartment is on the other side of town, but at least it was closer to Izuku's warehouse, Mei's lab, and UA. He chewed on his bottom lip lightly and looking up to the ceiling. He would not cry, especially not in front of his all-time favorite hero, and if you're trying to not cry in front of me, it's pointless. I've known you for probably not even a week, and I've seen you have both a full-blown panic attack and what I would say was a mental breakdown. Hitoshi could only shake his head and continued trying to hold back the tears. Aizawa sighed. "Shinso, please. I had to hold you back and pin you down when you wouldn't give the doctor space. I think you also bit me. Twice. Just cry, please." Hitoshi wanted to roll his eyes, to argue back and say that the man was being dramatic, but he didn't have the energy in him. So, if anyone asked, Hitoshi didn't sob again, muffling his ragged breathing into Bean's fur. He didn't let Aizawa ruffle his hair, and he definitely did not let Yamada hug him gently. He didn't let the blonde hold his hand as they walked to the car, while Aizawa locked the doors back up, and whatever anyone says, Hitoshi didn't fall asleep back on the gray couch in the pro hero's apartment, while his head resting on Yamada's shoulder, and Aizawa made sure the blanket wouldn't slip off his body. If anyone said otherwise, they were a big, fat fucking liars. "Tomura, please. It's not fair." The young man scratching at his neck aggressively, pacing back and forth while whining in a childish manner. "You don't understand, Kurigiri. That moron had one job. How did you fail to pick up a quirkless fucker? They can't even defend themselves." Kurigiri carefully ran a damp rag on the edge of the glass and collected any dust that needed to be cleaned off. "It was just the first attempt. We will have many tries." Red Eyes expressed nothing but a look of similar to a rabid animal as Tomura sat down, hands shaking in pure anger. "Sensei has entrusted this to me. I can't fail. I won't. I won't. I won't. I won't. We need to become stronger." He was still naive, but it's not Kurigiri's place to make that comment. He insisted, pushing the conversation along. "You were recommended to find strong allies. Have you been looking?" "I have," Tomura shrieked. "And I found two. But they just stopped showing up to our meetings." "And what are these meetings exactly? I was not aware of this plan." "They would show up and I would give them different tasks to do. I want them to prove their worth. Then they didn't show up. But I needed them. They belong to me. They're my players." Kurigiri had held back a sigh, moving on to the next cup. He understood that Tomura was still young. That was very much obvious, consistently reflecting in the ways his mind worked and his actions. He was too hasty, always diving into things without a plan, and he was bound to make a mistake too large too soon. "No matter," the man huffed. "We have something bigger coming up that has to be my focus. Yes, Sensei told me he believes in me, so I have to accomplish this correctly. Have you read the plan I wrote out for you?" "Yes, Tomura. Very well done." Kurigiri did read it. It looked as if it was written by a 12-year-old. "There's no way this can go wrong, right?" Tomura whispered. He didn't want to lie, but Kirigiri also knew that no matter what, he was there to support Tomura. So he nodded. You've worked hard on this. Covered every part. I believe you are ready. Tomura smiled creepily, setting down the gray hand from his face on top of the counter. He looked up to the ceiling. And I'm going to check out the security system tomorrow at UA. I want to see how it works close up. Kirigiri whipped his body around. Tomura, you cannot. You'll get caught easily if you show up on there on your own. It's far too dangerous for... Shut up. I know what I'm fucking doing. I'm not a child. You know, I have a game switch there. I'm in control. You're just a pawn, and you know that. I know. Good. So know your place. If you're so eager to know, I've set up some cover for me, so don't worry about it. There'll be far too many people there at once for me to be spotted. Kirigiri wanted to ask further questions, but one glance at the blood on Tomura's actual hand smothered his words down. And the Quirkless plan? What's the next steps on that accord? He asked instead. Hands returning to his neck, Tomura leaned onto the counter and frowned in thought. I'll have to find another target. It was hard enough finding a Quirkless as it is. Do you know how rare they are these days? I suppose it makes sense. Most that existed already killed themselves. I would too if I was that fucking worthless. They need to know they have purpose. Tomura stood back up and crossed his arms. I would start with news articles. Maybe a failed suicide attempt. That would make your pawn moldable, right? A weak mind would be perfect, just like Sensei said. But how do we even fail at something that simple? Asking around would just be suspicious. Kirigiri stayed silent, letting his young man mumble as he returned to wiping down the bar. And next time, I'll carry out the deed myself. This man called himself an expert at abductions. Sad. Kirigiri winced at the sound of something heavy being kicked, then a sound that could be comparable to someone stepping in a puddle. No, I don't want to risk my positioning. Oh, perhaps it'll be easier for you to just carry it out yourself. Warp the Quirkless right to us. Gah, I gotta figure out our upcoming mission. That's more important. Tomura laughed, his dry voice and raspy, as he sighed dreamily. Good talk. Kirigiri, now do me a favor and get rid of this. The man exited the main part of the bar and disappeared through the door and down a dark hallway, leaving blood smearing on the walls just for the fun of it. Kirigiri set his rag down slowly and sighed, approaching the mess that Tomura left. Blood pooled around his feet, sinking into the cracks of the floor, and the smell of iron and rotting flesh nearly overwhelming. You put yourself in this situation, Kirigiri whispered at the man, looking into his lifeless eyes. Then a huge cavity in his chest that Tomura decayed, blood still oozing out slowly. The corpse skin was left gray, and the man's expression was still frozen in the same way when Tomura had reached in and literally decayed his heart, but not before pulling it out and doing so the victim could watch. Good thing I brought bleach, he told himself as he opened a portal next to the body, giving one large kick, sending the corpse into the abyss. The exit point, a place only Kirigiri would know of, rolling up his sleeves and sliding on a pair of rubber gloves. He whispered to himself as he mopped up the big puddle of red, only stopping when it was time to get to work with the bleach. Young Tomura, he didn't even let the man speak when he arrived, only decayed him the minute the man said the word fail. No, because now they had an idea why the mission simply failed, because everyone knows. A dead man tells no tales. Hitoshi doesn't know how he got to school. He doesn't remember. But here he is, and an alarm is currently screeching in the cafeteria while Kaminari looks like he's on the verge of tears from the loud noise. Ashido doing her best to shield his ears to keep him from screaming. The blonde watched Hitoshi with wide eyes. Was he waiting for something? What did he want? What's going on? Sarah shouted loud enough for Hitoshi to hear. The two of them turned to see Ida pulling Yutaraka along. Asui, Aoyama, Jiro, and Yaoyorozu trailing behind them. We have to go, Ida shouted while moving his hand in a robotic motion. This alarm means that security has been breached, and I do not believe this is some sort of drill. We would have been informed beforehand. Without hesitation, Hitoshi stood up and grabbed Kaminari and Sero, who used his tape to grab Ashido. They followed the first group of their classmates out of the cafeteria and into an extremely crowded hallway, bodies touching Hitoshi from every angle. He hated it. And it seems Kaminari did too, as his yellow eyes were wider and more alert than normal. Shinso, Ida called over his shoulder. It's just the media. There's nothing wrong, but no one will listen to me. Hitoshi tried to answer, but instead felt Kaminari's thin wrist slip from his hold, following by a fearful cry from the shorter boy. No thanks, Hitoshi thought, spinning around and grabbing what he could, a fistful of the electric blonde's hair, and yanking the boy back, feeling him crash into his side. Hitoshi was struggling to think, but it was clear Ida was desperate for help. He couldn't exactly brainwash everyone at once. It was hard enough using it on 3 people, let alone the entire school of people. His mauve eyes frantically moving to Yutaraka. Then it clicked. Yutaraka, make Ida float. Then he can get everyone's attention. And with a long reach, Yutaraka was able to get all 5 fingers on the boy, his entire body levitating to the ceiling. Hitoshi tried to listen to what Ida was saying, but an intense ringing suddenly exploded in his ears. It felt someone fired a gunshot right next to him. He looked around with a blurry vision. Was no one else hearing this? The crowd stopped moving, and Ida was shouting something, but Hitoshi heard nothing. Just that god-awful sound that was making his hands shake and his knees weak. He looked out of the large window to see where the media was gathered just outside the gate of UA, metal wall closed to keep them out. Aizawa, Yamada, and Midnight shouting back at the others. Hitoshi could feel a headache steadily building in his brain, but it wasn't the same as I have 7 Monster Energy drinks headache, or even I drank way too many liters of caffeine headache. This felt like his head was splitting in 2. His vision was growing blurry and black. Tears built up in his eyes from the sheer intensity of the pressure. But it was then gone just as fast, and Sero's words became louder. Dude! The boy shook his shoulders. Your ears! The crowd began to disperse, and Kaminari was still clinging onto his torso with wide eyes. But there was a small amount of blood dripping down from his forehead, trailing down the bridge of his freckled nose and falling off the tip. Did I pull your hair that hard? Hitoshi panicked for a moment, but Kaminari shook his head, wiping some blood off with a handkerchief Yaoyorozu created for him. The blonde was still breathing heavily, but his grip was slowly releasing Hitoshi, and it seemed his panic expression was subsiding. Was Kaminari seriously that freaked out over just a little noise? Wasn't he in the hero course? Here, Yaoyorozu ushered suddenly, pushing another tissue into Hitoshi's hand while he blinked in confusion. The students all stared at him with waiting eyes, while Hitoshi just stared back with the corner of his mouth pulled into a slight frown. What are they waiting for? Shinso! Jiro decided to shout while throwing her hands above her head, then shouting at him, Your ears are bleeding, man! The purple-haired boy brought his hand to his ears gently. His ears felt sore and raw. The contact stung immediately. He dipped his fingers against the skin below his ears and swept them along his jaw, then drawing his hand back in front of his eyes, staring at his fingers. They were coated in warm, red, sticky blood. Yay, we got it done! We got it done! Ow! Okay, I am very confused. I'm like, what going on with Hitoshi's ears? I was thinking that it could be with his quirk, but I know that he didn't even attempt to use his quirk at all when he was even thinking about trying to brainwash everyone. Unless his quirk, because it is a mental one, actually makes it where he's sensitive to other mental users. But I don't know. Or maybe it's something that is, yeah, I have no idea. I'm gonna leave that alone. Okay, so if you want to see more of this, what's going on with his ears, you know what to do.